Today, we're taking a trip to Switzerland, and we're going to explore this really fascinating idea: how the very ground we live on, the mountains, the valleys, whether or not you can get to the sea, how that can shape not just a country's economy, but its entire way of life. So this is the big question we're digging into. How does all that geography, the mountains, the lakes, the fact that there's no coastline, do more than just make a pretty postcard? You'll see it influences everything from the jobs people do to the very rhythm of their daily lives. Okay, first let's zoom out into the big picture. We're starting with Switzerland as a whole. It's a nation smack dab in the heart of Europe, but it's got this one huge geographical feature that really sets it apart from a lot of its neighbors.
And that big feature, Switzerland is completely landlocked. It's totally surrounded by other countries. You've got France, Germany, Austria, and Italy, with absolutely no direct path to the ocean. And look, this isn't just a random fact for a trivia night. It has huge implications for things like trade, defense, even how the country sees itself.
Now, the country has a population of about 8 million people.
That number might seem a little abstract right now, but just file it away. It's our national baseline. And trust me, we're going to use it later to make a comparison that's really, really powerful.
Right. You can't even begin to talk about Switzerland's geography without talking about its most massive, most dramatic feature, the Alps. I mean, these aren't just some pretty background scenery. They are the #1 force that has shaped this nation's climate, its economy, and some of its most incredible feats of engineering. These giant, snow-covered peaks are basically the engine behind the country's famously wild weather. They act as this massive wall, right? Forcing air up and down, creating this wild patchwork of microclimates where a sunny valley can be sitting right next to a stormy mountaintop.
The power of the Alps really cuts both ways. On one hand, they are a massive tourist magnet, pulling in skiers all winter and hikers all summer. But on the other hand, they're just a formidable obstacle. To connect their own towns and link up with countries like Italy, the Swiss had to become absolute masters of engineering, carving these impossibly long tunnels through the mountains and building these jaw-dropping bridges over crazy deep valleys.
So we've had the 30,000-foot view. Now let's zoom in, like way in. We're going to focus on just one village to see how these huge geographical forces, the mountains, the weather, actually play out in the day-to-day lives of a real community.
So, let me introduce you to a place called Zurich. It's this tiny little village just nestled right on the shore of the beautiful Lake Lucerne, and it's tucked into this narrow valley with these steep mountains just shooting up dramatically on all sides.
And hey, remember that 8 million figure for the whole country? Well, get this. Zurich has a population of just 400. 400! That's the contrast right there. We've gone from the scale of a whole nation to the intimacy of a tiny town, and this is where you can really see geography at work.
A little while ago, I mentioned the Alps make the climate changeable. Well, Zurich is the perfect example. In January, the village is just buried in deep snow, and the average high is the chilly 2 degrees Celsius. But then, fast forward to July, and it's a completely different world. It's lush, it's green, and it's 25 degrees. Life here is truly a tale of 2 very different seasons. And culturally, this tiny village is kind of like a mini Switzerland. Most of the folks there speak German, but because it's at this European crossroads, you'll definitely hear some French and Italian in the mix too. So, this brings us right to the heart of it all. For the 400 people who call this place home, how does this incredibly specific geography, these steep slopes, this lakeside spot, directly dictate their jobs and their local economy? I mean, really think about that for a second. It's a huge challenge, right? You can't just go out and plant massive fields of wheat or corn when your backyard is practically vertical. So, how do you adapt? How do you make a living from an environment like that? And this quote from our source material just nails the core problem. It says it all. The soil is too thin and the slopes are too steep for crops to be grown. It's as simple as that. So what do you do? Well, the answer is actually pretty brilliant in its simplicity. It's this beautiful adaptation born out of pure necessity. If you can't grow crops, you use the land for what it is good for. And in this case, those steep, grassy slopes, they're perfect for grazing animals. And this leads to this really amazing traditional kind of farming. In the summer, when the snow melts, the farmers guide their cattle way up the mountains to graze on these high-altitude meadows that are just bursting with lush green grass. Then, when winter starts to creep in, they bring all the cattle back down to the village. The animals stay inside, safe and warm from the heavy snow, and what do they eat?
They eat the hay that was cut and dried from those very same mountain meadows during the summer. It's this perfect, sustainable loop that's totally dictated by the seasons.
And what's the result of this incredible style of alpine farming? Well, you get the products that have sustained this region for centuries: meat, fresh milk, and of course, some of that milk gets turned into the world-famous cheeses that Switzerland is known for.
But here's what's really smart. The people of Sisakan didn't just put all their eggs in the farming basket. They built a really diverse local economy that stands on 3 legs, and all of them come straight from their geography. They use the stunning scenery for tourism, and they've cashed in on their location to become a key transport link.
And this point is so important. You might look at a tiny mountain village and think it's isolated, but Sisakan is the complete opposite. Its road and its railway are vital arteries. They're essential corridors for people and goods moving between Italy in the south and all of northern Europe.
And this really is the big takeaway. In a small place like Sisakan, it's crystal clear. You can see exactly how every single part of life, the food people eat, the work they do, the very rhythm of their year, is a direct and logical answer to the mountains and the lake that surround them.
So we'll leave you with this final thought. We've just seen how a very real, physical landscape, a mountain and a lake, can completely define a community. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the invisible landscapes in our own lives, the social, the economic, the cultural mountains and valleys that are quietly shaping who we are?